Welcome. Good morning, or if you're in another part of the world, good afternoon, good evening. We're excited to have Professor Jessica Hua on with us today. I know biology is a topic that a lot of our students are interested in, so I think this will be a great chance for you to learn about research, learn a little bit about what Binghamton University looks like as a biology major, what the programming looks like. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jess, and she can tell us a little bit about, give us a little bit of a broad overview before going into her research area.
Great. Thank you so much, Carrie, for the introduction, and thank you all for being here. It's a great opportunity for me to tell you all a little bit more about the biology department here at Binghamton University, and also maybe give you a sense of what it would look like to do research in our department. And so, as Carrie mentioned, I'll start off broadly with a little bit of details on the biology department, and then I'll transition a little bit more into what it would look like to do research. And so you guys are all here likely because you have interest in biology at some level. We all recognize that biology is a highly diverse discipline. And so the first thing that I would like to do is to take a quick poll to sort of understand who I'm talking to. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to show a series of photos that represent biologists and professions that you might be able to pursue with a degree in biology. And so what I'm hoping to do is to have you choose the picture that looks the most appealing to you. So I'm going to go ahead and switch my screen over for this first poll. Okay, so again, which looks most appealing to you? So we have A through F. A represents a biologist in the medical field. B represents somebody that is interested in microbiology research, lab research. C is a science communicator. D represents field research, so sort of in the realm of ecology and evolution. E represents veterinary science. F might be something more regulatory, so something in the government, EPA, park ranger, for example. So those are your options, and I'll give a bit of time for people to vote. Okay, as I suspected, many of you are most interested in sort of understanding a little bit more about the medical aspect of the field of biology. And this is fantastic because what I get the wonderful opportunity to do is to tell you about the diverse Department of Biology. And then from there, what we'll do is we'll end with a 1-minute video perspective of what it will look like as a student pursuing a pre-med sort of direction. Great. All right, so now that I know a little bit more about you, I promised I would tell you a little bit more about the department here at BU. The first thing that I want to convey is biology is diverse, and our department reflects that diversity. So with the degree programs, we have an undergraduate degree, a graduate degree, so you'll be interacting both with your peers as undergraduates, as well as there are many graduate students in the department. There's also a 4+1 degree program, which is a fantastic and efficient way to get your master's while also working towards your bachelor's. So at the end of this 4+1 program, you get both your bachelor's as well as a master's degree. And then finally, there's the opportunity to pursue a minor in biology. So taking a step back, there are about 30 faculty members in the biological sciences, and our expertise is wide-ranging. The way the department is organized, we have 3 broad categories. So global change biology, this is the majority of what you will hear today. Infectious disease, and also genetic and molecular interactions. So these are the 3 broad themes, but we recognize that all of these themes are interacting, and so many of the faculty, while we have expertise in one of these areas, we often work at the intersection between multiple areas. So I say this because that means that this department is highly integrated and collaborative. This is important and beneficial to you as a student because that means in any faculty member that you work with, you get to draw upon expertise upon multiple topics. So you end up with a really diverse set of skills. So what is it that I will tell you about today? I want to give you, so this is sort of just a picture of what it looks like. I want to show you what it actually, like an example of what a student might experience. My expertise is global change biology, but again, we are all integrative. We work with global change, understanding what humans do to the environment, but specifically we look at how humans influence infectious diseases, and we look at it at the genetic and molecular level by looking at things like the microbiota. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in the next few slides. So my responsibilities here at Binghamton University, I've been here 5 years. I was born in New York, but was raised in Austin, Texas. My responsibilities here lie in teaching and in research. So for teaching, I typically teach the upper level courses. So a few upper level courses. I teach ecology, which is a core course in biology. I teach freshwater ecology. This is a hands-on class, so we take a lot of field trips to connect what students are learning with what we actually see in nature. So a lot of the courses in the biology department are this hands-on applied learning as well as classroom learning. And then I also teach ecotoxicology, which is a seminar course. This seminar course has a large public engagement component, which means we learn about chemicals and how they affect the environment and how they affect humans, but also we take that information and we package it in a way that engages our community. And I'll tell you a little bit at the end about what that might look like. In terms of the research, I run a lab of about 15 students. I have 4 PhD students and 1 master's students, and the rest of the students are undergraduates. And so a large proportion of our work is completely reliant on the undergraduate students in my lab. And so for the research that we do, this is just a screenshot of the lab webpage if you're interested in learning more. What we're interested in understanding is, as human populations grow, we recognize that our influence is going to continually affect natural ecosystems. Specifically, a central theme in my lab is to understand what contaminants do to natural ecosystems. So things like road salts, pesticides, road chemicals, and also pharmaceuticals. All of these different contaminants are used, or chemicals are used, and can contaminate what we find in wetland ecosystems. So my lab focuses on wetland ecosystems, and a central question is, what do they do? And at this point, knowing my audience, I know you guys many of you guys are interested in the medical field. I always want to take this time by asking, well, who cares about wetlands? Why should you care? Especially if you're interested in the medical area, right? And I argue that there are 3 reasons that I typically give. 1, wetlands support a huge diversity of really awesome creatures. And many of these creatures also have implications for public health. For instance, amphibians consume mosquitoes, which are important vectors for disease spread. Understanding and protecting this service can have cascading consequences on public health. Additionally, we know that these wetland ecosystems provide other services to human society, so recreation, and importantly, flood control. Wetlands serve as a sponge, so they slow the flow of water, and it can help to prevent something that looks like this. So there are many benefits of wetlands, and also I bring this up because it means that in your classes there's a lot of interconnected talk about nature and health, and also the genetic and molecular interactions the themes that I brought up earlier. And so going back to some of the research that we do in the lab and that undergraduates can get involved in, the main question is, what are the effects of contaminants on wetland ecosystems? We do this in a very tiered approach sort of perspective. So we start simple and start adding in more and more complexity that you would find in nature. What does this look like, and how do undergraduates get involved? This is Michael Corshi. His project looked at, very simply, what does a pesticide do to multiple amphibian species? And using simple laboratory tests, all he does is he takes away all complexity, and in doing so, he can compare the toxicity of various chemicals across various organisms. And I'm really, really excited to report that Michael has published this work as an undergraduate. Moving forward, these really simple tests are fantastic in helping us compare the effects of chemicals. But we know that contaminants are not the only stressor that organisms like tadpoles face. For instance, in nature, there are other threats. This is a dragonfly nymph, so a larval dragonfly. If anybody has seen the movie Alien, this is one of the animals that it's based off of. So what you're seeing here, it's a jaw that is folded under the animal, and it's a sit and wait predator. So it'll wait for a prey item to swim by, and then it'll shoot out its mouth part. All of this to say that it's extremely terrifying to have this dragonfly nymph in the water for tadpoles. And this is important. This is the complexity that I'm talking about. Yes, we can understand what pesticides do, but what Matt found is that in the presence of just the smell of this predator, the susceptibility of this tadpole became 30% more susceptible to the pesticide carbaryl, which is you can find in the grocery store, than without the predator. And so here is an example of where integrating that complexity is important, and another example of how students can take different topics and different levels of complexity and integrate it into their own research. Now I talk about the effects of predators and enemy on tadpoles, but it works the other way too. Road salts. This is something that is used throughout our area. And you know what, like the use of road salts on the roads, it's high and there's a lot of salts used, but when it gets into natural ecosystems, oftentimes the concentration is much, much lower. And so you might think, well, who cares about road salts then if the concentrations are so low? And generally I would agree with you, but if we were only thinking about these really simplistic scenarios, what Nick has demonstrated is that he's found that these low concentrations of salt, yes, they don't cause direct mortality, they don't kill tadpoles at these concentrations, but what they do is they make these tadpoles more susceptible to their parasites. And this is a parasite that many of my undergraduates work with, and we find that it's a really useful connection in thinking about ecological diseases and how we might understand how ecological diseases work and help inform how diseases might influence human populations. Lastly, I've told you about two enemies, and so I told you about predators and also parasites. Obviously, it's much more complex than that. And here is a wonderful opportunity that is available at Binghamton University, especially in the biology department. We have a field station. It's called the Ecological Research Facility. There are opportunities here to increase the complexity, to build artificial ponds, to see if what we find in the lab actually plays out in more complex environments. And so in the picture on the top, this is just a bunch of undergraduates that worked in my lab, and they were working on Paradise Blackwood's project, looking at how temperature influences community dynamics. I'm especially proud of Paradise, and I bring this up. Paradise was an undergraduate in my lab. She did independent research, graduated, then got accepted into a PhD program at Purdue University, and recently was just awarded an NSF fellowship. So this is an incredible, huge deal. And much of this, she developed a lot of the experience while at Binghamton University. Finally, hands down, what I think is one of the most rare and unique items of our campus is this nature preserve. So talk about building up complexity. Here we can actually go right out into our backyard and actually see natural processes occurring. And the nature preserve is not the only area that we can do this. There's Nuthatch Hollow, which is right across the street from the nature preserve. And a point about Nuthatch Hollow, this is going to be the site of a living building. This is a net zero building. Actually, it's going to put more energy out than it actually uses. So a very, very interesting opportunity to study sustainable architecture, sustainable practices. And also there's Lake Lieberman. This is a student in my lab who is collecting amphibians right behind the dorms here on campus. So many opportunities in our area to go from simple to complex. And so at this point, I just want to take a step back, right? And I've talked to you about the effects of chemicals on the environment. But we can't forget that these chemicals are around because we need them. For example, I drive this car. It is terrible in the snow. And so I 100% rely on de-icing salt so that I can make it to work safely. Additionally, I talked about earlier, populations of humans are growing and growing. We need food to support these populations. And so in any conversation about chemicals in the environment, I think it's important to also consider the balance. And so this brings me to the idea of science communication. Many of you may recognize that there's a problem and a challenge of mistrust in science. And so the next slide is actually a poll. I want to understand how well you know a scientist, and is there, ultimately I want to know, does this contribute potentially to this mistrust? And so there are 3 answers here. You don't know any scientists, you know maybe one scientist, but don't actually interact with them, so you don't know them personally, or you know at least one scientist and you interact with them regularly. And I know that like you might fall in between some of these options, but just choose the answer that best fits. Wow, great. So it looks like 38% of you guys don't know any scientists, 38% know at least one scientist, but don't get to interact with them. And only 24 of you guys, so 25% of you guys interact with them regularly. So it looks like generally most people don't know scientists. And why do I bring this up? I bring this up because some folks think that this mistrust in science might be due to the fact that Americans don't know scientists. And it's something that is important to members of my lab, that we try to fix this, that we improve our ability to communicate our science to broader audiences. And this is important because if you think about it, what is the point of doing science if we're not getting that information to the people that can do something about it? And so what is unique about being at a university is that in order to have effective science communication, you have to be able to communicate to people outside of your field. So we have transdisciplinary areas of excellence where students have the ability and the opportunity to talk to and collaborate with engineers, regulators, geologists, artists. And so I want to bring this up, and I know that perhaps transdisciplinary areas of excellence, it's sort of just a term to you now. And so I thought that the best way to convey how this works is to give you an example of somebody that worked in my lab. So this is Benjamin McLaughlin. He was an undergraduate, an artist that joined my lab, and he wanted to see if art might be a useful tool for communicating our passion for wetlands, how we might protect wetlands. And so we got to talking, and we thought, if art was really useful, it should be able to get people to care about something that nobody would care about normally. And so we thought, okay, well, parasites. Most people could care less about how amazing parasites are. And so my idea was, well, why don't we try to make a children's book on parasites? You can probably say this was my original vision. I am certainly not an artist. I'm pretty sure that's a bird. This is probably people. In any case, this was my vision. Ben took this idea, put it into a storyboard, and then designed this incredibly beautiful book about Gemma Jones as she goes through the life cycle of Talia the trematode. And it was really, really exciting to go through this process. This book is now published, and it was distributed to our local schools around Binghamton University. It reached 593 students, so they were able to read this book. They then went on a field trip to a local museum. And this book is called Gemma Jones Visits Nuthatch Hollow because the idea is that they would then in the future get to come back to the university and actually meet the live organisms that the characters in the book. And so this is one example of how we could integrate biology with other disciplines to engage with the public. So we do research, but we also find public engagement to be something that is incredibly important in my lab. So that sort of brings me to the end of what opportunities might look like in labs on campus. I wanted to also spend some time highlighting that a unique thing about our department is that you can get research also in your courses. And so oftentimes research in labs might be limited, but at Binghamton University, we have opportunities such as the first year research immersion program, so the FRI program, where first year students get the opportunity to enroll in a class and do authentic research in their first year. But in addition to these FRI programs, beyond the first year, you also have more upper level course-based research opportunities. In these classes, I run one with my collaborator, Dr. George Meindl. It's in plant ecology. And what we do is we have students go through every step of the research process in class. They help to design the experiment. They help to conduct the experiment, carry out the experiment. So everything that helps them learn the process of science. And there are similar programs in genetics and biolab. And the key here is when it comes to research, the topic doesn't matter. It's about learning the process of science. And these students really do get that experience. And as an example, many of these students are on publications resulting from these class experiments. So last but not least, I suggested that I would talk a little bit more. There's research opportunities in classes, but also public engagement opportunities. I teach ecotoxicology, and as you are all very well aware, this year has been very different in that we are in a situation with COVID-19. So in this class, we tried to take information about chemicals and spread it out to the public. What has come up because of this COVID-19 spin is that a lot of parents are now having to deal with homeschooling. And so homeschooling, having never had the experience, can be challenging. And so this is Jacqueline. She's a student in my class, and here's an example of how she has taken the situation, linked it with ecotoxicology to create a product that engages the public. She's created a homeschool lesson plan using chemicals around the house, and this is going to be distributed through our connections with our local schools. So just an example of what types of projects you might be able to get involved in as a bio major. And so to wrap things up, in the very beginning, I asked about what looks most appealing to you, and the answers were fairly diverse, with the majority of you interested in pre-med. I think hopefully by the end of this talk, you will have recognized that BU students and the opportunities for research, they're at the heart of research and engagement. And this is a really unique skill set, regardless of what job you want to end in the future. Learning how to do science and learning what it means and how science is processed is key to being successful in any one of these professions. And so this brings me to the end of this sort of particular research aspect. But as I promised in the beginning, what I'd like to transition over, given the interest of this group, Carrie will be showing a 1-minute video of the personal experience of a student in the pre-med program here at Binghamton University.
Hi, my name's Jack Barnett. I'm a bio major here at Binghamton, and I have about 60 seconds to tell you about it. So why did I choose biology? For me, it made the most sense because I'm on the pre-med track, and all of that kind of just goes hand in hand. My favorite class here at Binghamton is definitely molecular genetics with Dr. Tamarillo. Wonderful class, wonderful professor. Definitely take that if you get the chance. I'm in a club. It's called Partners in Health. So what we do is basically we raise money for global health concerns, you know, the Ebola outbreak, Zika, all that kind of stuff. One thing that really surprised me about biology is when you do research, it's mostly tedious pipetting, but you know, eventually it pays off. You see some cool things. And hopefully in 5 to 10 years, I'll be done with med school and working in a hospital somewhere. So there you go. That's biology in about 60 seconds.
Okay, I think we're going to move on to some Q&A sessions now. So Jessica, we've got a couple questions here to start us off. You touched on this briefly, but maybe we can expand a little bit on how we utilize these. Do your classes take students out into the nature preserve or into the greenhouse, and can students access these places without being in one of your courses?
Yeah, fantastic question. So my classes do take students out into the nature preserve, as well as other local wetlands. So I mentioned that I teach freshwater ecology. So we are so fortunate to have a number of natural resources all around us. And so students really get the opportunity to compare and contrast different areas. And I know that my course is not the only course. We find that it's incredibly important to pair that book learning with actual experiential learning. So there are other opportunities like mycology, fungi. We also have a number of classes that are health associated, so lab courses that are connected that also connect to the natural areas. For example, microbial research in the nature preserve, for instance. Are students allowed in the nature preserve? Absolutely. This is one of the gems of our campus. There are many miles of hiking trails back in the nature preserve. The other facilities, Nuthatch Hollow, it's currently closed because we're working on that living building, but typically it's open to both the public and students. So hopefully that answered your question.
Thank you. I think it did. And so you did touch on freshman research, but for other students and other kinds of opportunities, can you tell us how students may get to know faculty and make some of those connections so that they could get involved, whether it's their freshman year in their second semester or continuing into their sophomore and junior year? What's the best way to start making those connections with faculty members?
Sure. So in my experience, the best students and the students that tend to get these opportunities working in a lab are those that do their research. And to be completely honest, it's also in your best interest. What are you interested in? And the best way to start doing that is to explore the biology faculty page. Look at all the faculty that are listed. Is there a particular faculty member that does research that you think is interesting? After doing that research, the next step would be to reach out to that professor and ask if they have any openings in their lab. And then typically what happens then is that they'll go through the interview process, and some faculty members will have you interview with them alone. Other faculty members, it's important that their new students interact well with other students in their lab, so you'll also interact and interview with members of the lab. And this all varies depending on the faculty member, but what is general across all faculty members is be sure to understand the faculty's research to make sure it's something that you actually want to pursue, because you're putting a lot of time ultimately into pursuing this research.
Thank you. So we have a student here who also would like to know if you're experienced in research and want to join an upper level program, but you're not in the FRI track, what opportunities exist for you and how does that look?
That is a good question. So multiple ways you could go. So a lot of faculty, a lot of labs here on campus actually welcome freshman researchers. So the idea is that getting people into their labs early, training them and having them work in the lab for 4 years is absolutely a wonderful situation. So you could go about it by contacting faculty like I mentioned in the last question. Or the biology department has recently reconfigured our intro level courses. We now offer a biology lab which is similar to the FRI in that it provides authentic research experiences. And so you also have the opportunity, and I believe all students actually have to go through this course-based research course in biology before they can make it to the upper level classes.
Great. And then we do have a question about pre-med, but I think this is a good one for you. So does going into the pre-med track mean that you must become a doctor? If you want to do medical research, must you do the pre-med track?
So you don't have to ultimately become a doctor, even if you're on the pre-med track. So I have a few students in my lab that this sort of happened with. So my student Quentin, he fulfilled every single course on the pre-med track, and in the end decided he wanted to pursue research. And so what he's doing now is he transitioned to the 4+1 program, where he is going to actually leave Binghamton University with a master's degree, even though he started with the pre-med track. And when it comes to pre-med, a lot of my students also shift from pre-med to pre-vet or pre-dentistry, so it's quite diverse.
Thank you. And I think as this student mentioned, there are plenty of ways to get into research without doing the pre-med track as well, correct?
Absolutely.
And there's a question here. I don't know if maybe you don't know the answer, and that's okay, but is there research on ultrasound technology at Binghamton?
That is a question I don't know the answer to. At least in the biology department, I'm not aware of any ultrasound technology, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist on campus. So I can think of engineering programs where they might be interested in something like this, or even the geology program.
Thank you. And here's another question about the research process. So I know that the school will fund students to do their own research. Is there a grant proposal needed? Do the first year students, can they only join faculty research, or can they also submit their own grant proposals? And how does that process kind of work?
So the school does fund student research, and there are so many opportunities to get involved with undergraduate research. So the one that I'm most familiar with is the Summer Scholars Research and Artists Program. And what this is students apply by putting together a research proposal. They typically work with the faculty because it's a very competitive program, and it helps to have faculty support. And so a successful proposal to this program lets the students stay over the summer and actually spend all of their time doing research in the area that they're interested in. This also applies to artists, so artists can pursue a similar program. And in fact, many of my students in my lab have pursued this. This is a summer program, but there are also opportunities during the year. So the Undergraduate Research Center would be a great place to look for opportunities. Many of these opportunities, though, I would say you would want to connect with the faculty member, because you'll need space and you'll need resources, and oftentimes the faculty member would be willing to provide you that.
Great, thank you. I want to switch a little bit to more of on a personal note, just ask a little bit more about your story and how you got involved in your area of research and what led you to Binghamton.
Sure. Man, where to start? It's been so long. I did my undergraduate degree at Southwestern University in Texas. I went to Southwestern University because of sports. So I had no idea what I wanted to do. All I knew was I wanted to continue my career in sports, which I played basketball. And so I went to Binghamton or Southwestern University, and by the time I hit my junior year, it was getting to the point where I needed to figure out where to go. I was so lucky to have been offered a research experience during that critical moment. And I was pre-med at the time. And this research experience completely changed my perspective. Instead of memorizing things, I was able to take that information and convert it into something that I could actually apply. And so my senior year, I transitioned from pre-med to looking at a research career. And from there, I went to do my doctorates in ecology and evolution at the University of Pittsburgh, which is a fantastic city. From there, after getting my doctorates, I went to Purdue University. So it's typical for someone in my field to do a postdoctoral experience where you diversify your experiences. So I went to Purdue. And then from there, I got the job at Binghamton University and started my lab here.
Great, thank you. And how long have you been at Binghamton, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, so I've been here for 5 years, and I do have to say, as a Texan, it's a pretty awesome place. I have zero regrets, other than being far from my family. This place is a really great place for in terms of opportunities, and also there are so many things to do. Natural areas, if that's something of interest to you, many things to connect with here.
Thank you. So our next question is, are there any biology courses geared towards the forensic field?
There's a subset of faculty that are in both the biology and in anthropology. And so I do know that there is a faculty group, or at least a lab, that does some forensic field research. In fact, up at the Ecological Research Facility for some time, there was an area where researchers buried a dead pig. They wanted to look at how decay over time can influence what microbes and what insects colonize this carcass. So it exists. I don't know much more about that.
That's okay. If it exists, I'm sure students can seek it out. So I think we'll start wrapping up here and just ask about your final thoughts and kind of the biology department at Binghamton. What makes it different from, you said you were at Pittsburgh and you've been to, Purdue and these other schools throughout your career. So what would you say sets Binghamton apart and how you mentioned no regrets, and so maybe delve into that a little bit more as we wrap up.
Sure. I think if I were to choose one thing that sets Binghamton apart, I think it's the opportunities for undergraduates to get involved with research. There are just so many different ways that you can get this really valuable skill. You can go through it via programs like FRI, SRI, so summer research experiences. You can find a lab. Our intro bio series begins immediately with research experiences. And what's really neat about all of these experiences, it's diverse. And so if you remember the 3 topics in biology, all of those are interconnected in all of the experiences that you get. And so you really do leave with a really strong fundamental core in what it means to do science, which really strengthens you regardless of where you go in your future career.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jess, for coming on. Thank you for our students who stayed until the end. We're really appreciative for everyone taking the time, and we hope you've learned a little bit more about the biology department, all the different research opportunities here, the various tracks, and you can always feel free to look on our Binghamton University's website and the biology department's website to learn more about any particulars you may be interested in, whether it's coursework, whether it's that 4+1 degree. I know there's one for the Masters of Science, but also an MBA program, and so students can diversify that way as well. So we just want to thank you again, Jess, for coming on, and we really appreciate you taking the time.
Not a problem. Hopefully I'll see some of you guys here in the future.
Thanks. Hope everyone has a great day.